Now, Britain is struggling with the economic impact of the coronavirus pandemic. A major supermarket chain just announced they'll start rationing items amid fears of second-wave panic buying. But things could get even worse after a no-deal Brexit. The British Retail Consortium warns that tariffs would push up prices, hitting shoppers and retailers alike. That's if goods actually arrive in the UK.
Long lines at the harbour of Dover and the Eurotunnel. The British government fears that trucks will wait up to 2 days in traffic jams to get through customs clearance. It believes there will be a backup of 7,000 HGVs, or heavy goods vehicles, waiting to cross into the EU from Kent. That's the worst-case scenario that London is currently grappling with.
The scenario builds on an estimate that only 50 to 70% of large businesses and just 20 to 40% of small and medium-sized enterprises would be ready for the strict application of new EU requirements. In those circumstances, that could mean that only between 30 and 60% of laden HGVs would arrive at the border with the necessary formalities completed for the goods on board. They'd therefore be turned back by the French border authorities, clogging the Dover to Calais crossing.
One reason why businesses are so poorly prepared is the coronavirus pandemic. The companies have been focusing on coping with the consequences of the lockdown. A think tank with economists from London's King's College has concluded that a no-deal Brexit could have 3 times the negative impact on the British economy as the coronavirus. The consequences of the pandemic may be more drastic in the short term, but in the long term, a no-deal Brexit would leave deeper scars.
Well, right now, everything points towards a no-deal Brexit, especially after British Prime Minister Boris Johnson decided to step back on parts of the withdrawal agreement, which was the basis for trade negotiations and which Johnson himself signed only last year. Well, for more, I'm joined by Craig Earlham, Senior Market Analyst at Wanda in London. Craig, good to have you with us. Well, the London Stock Exchange modelling has put the long-term economic hit from a no-deal Brexit at 8% of GDP. At the same time, JP Morgan is moving 200 billion euros from London to Frankfurt, citing Brexit as a reason. Why would London now seemingly push for a no-deal Brexit?
In all honesty, I don't think London is pushing for a no-deal Brexit. I think they believe the threat of no-deal Brexit has to be on the table in order to try and get some more favourable negotiating terms. Whether that's successful, we'll have to wait and see later on this year. But I don't think anyone, or I don't think most people at this stage really want no-deal Brexit, in particular business, and the government will be all too aware of that. I think the risk from no-deal Brexit stems from the government backing itself into a corner and potentially leaving itself with no other alternative.
Right, Craig, you mentioned it's like sort of this threat needs to be on the table in order to get more favourable terms. I know that the Brexit negotiations and everything has been going on now for 4 years. Nevertheless, do jog our memory. What is London actually after?
Well, I think that, there's a number of points still on the table. I think fishing rights is still a contentious issue in these negotiations. There is also about state aid, another issue in these negotiations. I think what London is primarily fighting for is the ability to effectively self-rule and is the ability to make these decisions itself. We've got to remember this is not a Conservative government that necessarily backs state aid to any significant degree, but the flexibility to allow itself to have the freedom to go down that route, for example, in the future, I think is an important negotiating ploy as far as this government is concerned. But like I say, I think we have to see this through the prism of a negotiation. What the government says it wants now and what it ultimately wants its end goal to be may be 2 entirely different things. You set your stall out here and here with the idea that hopefully you'll end up somewhere in between. And I think as far as the UK government is concerned, having no-deal Brexit as an option on the table, an extremely unfavourable outcome as far as both sides are concerned, particularly here in the UK, then that potentially moves that line from here slightly closer towards your favour. Again, whether that actually turns out to be true is an entirely different thing.
So while Britain or while London is playing such games, that's actually a quote from some European policymakers saying Britain should stop playing such games. But while this is happening, obviously, business doesn't quite know how to deal with what's coming or not coming. And now the British government actually says that British small and medium-sized enterprises failed to adequately prepare for Brexit. What exactly are they supposed to do?
Yeah, this again is a really strange point from Michael Gove. You can understand if 5% of businesses were unprepared, if 10% of businesses were unprepared, then you could say that this is solely the blame of these businesses because the guidelines are clearly clear enough that 90% of the businesses feel fully prepared. If 75% of businesses are unprepared, then this is ultimately the government that is to blame. Whether that is because they've lacked clarity in terms of their guidelines for how businesses must prepare. Maybe it's a cost issue, and especially when you're looking at SMEs, they just don't have the ability to be able to prepare because they don't have the cash available in order to invest in the way that large businesses are able to. Ultimately, if we get to the end of this year and 75% of SMEs are going to be unprepared for a Brexit, a hard Brexit, no-deal Brexit, then the government is ultimately to blame because it means that A, they've promised that this is going to be an extremely straightforward process. The prospect of lorries queuing at Dover is all scaremongering, and that businesses will be absolutely fine. They can't say this 1 minute and then a couple of months before no deal or a hard deal Brexit say that businesses are unprepared to this scale and it's all their fault. These two things just don't add up.
All right, just very, very briefly, Craig, on a scale from 1 to 10, what are the chances that we will see a deal by the end of the year?
I've been an eternal optimist throughout this. I still see it 7, 8 out of 10. But I will say that I will say that this is probably the most pessimistic I've been now for the last 4 years. I think it's in everyone's interest.
OK, Craig Earlham in London, thank you so much.
Thank you.